Hello, Garland Nixon here with Larry Johnson, and he's got a few great articles on his website, sonar21.com. We're going to go over them, over some of them. We're going to try to figure out what the heck is going on out here in this madhouse. Let's go. Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Larry Johnson. And Larry, in case you didn't know this, in case you've been living under a rock, Larry's got a great website. It is sonar21.com. All kinds of good articles on there. I go there regularly. I learn a lot from that. You can see a lot of what Larry's doing. And of course, there's a little thing that says support us. As you know, everybody, all the people who are doing this, they put a lot of money out of their own pockets. Nobody's getting rich here, so we need your assistance to keep this stuff going. So go to sonar21.com, click to support us, and if you are able to donate, even if you're not able to, just share it on all your social media platforms. All right, Larry, let's get started. Here's an interesting article. I know you've talked a lot about this, but we haven't talked about it, and that is, it's interesting you put that they launch a terrorist offensive for this reason. It doesn't seem to be a one-off. Now it appears to be there's more railways, that are more bombs, but it seems to me that they have gone into a phase where they're like, oh, well, if we're getting our butts kicked on the front lines and we're losing, we'll just go in another direction. Your thoughts on this, and who knew what and when, I guess, is the big question too.
Sure. So this takes me back to my days as an analyst in Central America at the CIA when we were looking at the Contra Wars. And one of the sort of criteria we used for evaluating where people stood in the war was whether it was the Contras or the FMLN, the communist, the Marxist-Leninist guerrillas in Salvador, whenever they attacked economic targets, as opposed to military targets, it was a sign of weakness. And so what we're seeing now in the case of Ukraine, on the one hand, there was wild celebration. Oh my God, they hit these Russian strategic bases and blew up all these aircraft, 41 aircraft. Well, it turned out that was a lie. They may have destroyed 3 out of service strategic bombers that were 75 years old and damaged about 3 to 4 other planes, but that was it. However, their attack on these bridges served no military purpose whatsoever. In fact, they timed blowing up one bridge so it would drop onto a train. So what we're seeing is Ukraine in desperation because of its growing weakness to be able to carry out military operations is resorting to terrorism. And what happened over this last weekend is significant because it represents now a change in how Russia is going to be dealing with Ukraine. Up to this point, Putin described this as a special military operation. That means it was not a full-fledged war. But yesterday in Putin's address to his national security advisors, one that was televised live to the people of Russia, Putin indicated this is now going to be carried out as a counterterrorism operation, which means it's going to be more lethal, it's going to be more proactive, and it's going to be far more destructive for Ukraine than anything they've experienced up to this point. So Ukraine, instead of weakening Russia, has actually emboldened them to act with greater resolve and greater force.
Your thoughts on, and that's the question. Trump said he didn't know. Then there was a report from Axios. Hegseth was getting reports. Then that gets withdrawn. Now, personally, I feel that it has MI6 written all over it. Not saying that the U.S. wasn't at least in the lead MI6 all over it, but your thoughts on the conversation that's being had about who knew what and when?
Well, let's first start with CIA. There are only three possibilities. Either the Ukrainians planned this without saying word one to the CIA, and the CIA never figured it out. Now, I thought they're supposed to be an intelligence outfit. They're supposed to know stuff like this. They got fooled. Or two, some of the officers assigned to Ukraine and based there, they know about this, and they didn't say anything to up their line of command, chain of command, or to the president. So they knew but did nothing, and they should have, at a minimum, have warned Ukraine, don't you do it, stop. Or third, absolutely knew about it because we were involved with helping them plan it so they could carry it out. None of those three options are good answers because the United States is involved in one way or another, either by omission or by commission. So, let's set aside U.S. involvement. Clearly, the Brits are involved. And the message that Putin delivered to Donald Trump yesterday was, Ukraine is now a terrorist state and is enabled by its supporters. He didn't spell out who those supporters are. I believe that was one of the issues that Putin raised with Trump yesterday in the conversation. Trump's did a good job of trying to put lipstick on that pig, pretend, oh yeah, it was this even-handed. I was giving Putin a piece of mind. I was telling him what I thought. Do you remember that scene from the movie of Patton, or it was called it was about D-Day in the preparations the 24 hours before, and Tom Selleck played Dwight David Eisenhower, and they had this some guy play General Patton, and so Patton comes straight his Ike's going to yell at Patton, and Patton comes in all cocky, gets in the office, gets a smackdown by Dwight David Eisenhower, and to the point that he's begging and crying and kissing Ike's hand, and then walks out and says, I showed him. That's Donald Trump. Donald Trump, when he's with Putin, is submissive and is apologetic, and because he had a lot to apologize for, he had to convince Putin, hey, we didn't know anything about this. If someone on my staff did, they kept me in the dark, and I'm gonna correct that. Yeah, this is outrageous. And Putin said, we are now obligated to strike back, and we will strike back against all who are involved with this. And Trump goes, okay, yeah, I understand. And so Trump, even in the message that he put out after that phone call, he admitted, yeah, they're going to hit back. And then the U.S. State Department issued a warning to all Americans in Ukraine: run for cover. You watch out, something bad's coming. So that's why I say this. What Trump says in public about, oh yeah, man, I told Putin, or yeah, I told Putin this dust up between him and Ukraine. It's like two kids fighting. I'm the parent, and these two kids are in the back seat scrapping. So I'm just going to let them scrap a little bit before I separate them. He's the damn person that helped set the place on fire. He's the arsonist, and pretends that I don't know nothing about birthing no babies. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, the old saying about the arsonist pretending he's a fireman.
Yeah.
No, he's trying it, but it ain't going to work. Hold on. Sorry about that. I had to answer that.
Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about this being a sign of weakness. I agree, because when my immediate thought was MI6 is involved, and MI6 is in a position now where they got nothing. The Brits have zero. They're holding what little they got left of a navy. They're holding together with super glue. Literally. There was an article a while back that said one of their nuclear reactors on one of their subs, the bolts broke off and they used super glue to hold it on. Now, here's what we got. Mark Root or whatever. NATO is more powerful than the Romans and no Napoleon. I guess they're next. They're going to say they're more powerful than the Death Star on
Star
Star
Wars.
Wars and
Yeah.
Battlestar Galactica, the whatever the robots were and all that. I mean, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, do you realize that you're screaming out loud? We're very weak. I feel very weak. So I got to try to say something to make it. We're more powerful than the Romans and Napoleon. Napoleon might not be the right metaphor to use when you're talking about the Russians, but I'm just saying. Well, or maybe actually, the right one. Huh?
Yeah, I would argue that it's a true statement because the Romans and Napoleon are dead.
You're
so
right.
At least NATO's got some breath moving around. That's about it.
Yeah.
Said I am stronger than the dead guy. Oh, great! Yeah, congratulations.
It's like I heard one like a couple years, 2 years ago, they asked Michael Jordan. They said, "Hey, do you think your team that won all those championships? Do you think you could beat the whatever team that won the Lakers or something just won a championship?" He said, "Yeah." They said, "By how much?" He said, "Like 2 points." They said, "Only 2?" He said, "Yeah." They said, "Why?" He said, "Because we're almost all 60. We're all almost 60 now."
Yeah.
But the point being, you're looking at NATO. Something's going on here, Larry, and that's this. They're staring at a catastrophic defeat, and there's no way out, is there?
No. As Ruta said about, I guess it was in February, he said, Russia builds more artillery shells in 3 months than all of us in NATO, with the United States included, can build in a year. And how are they going to magically turn that around? Now, related to that is this phone call that Trump had with Xi Jinping, because apparently one of the issues of discussion was the rare earth minerals. U.S. defense industry is in desperation mode because without those rare earth minerals, they cannot produce many weapons and communication systems. And Trump has, ended up screwing himself with his unilateral move to put tariffs on China. So now he's trying to get out from under that. And, again, I don't believe 80% of what Trump says anymore. He's proven himself just to be completely unreliable, and says a lot of things that are just objectively not true. And so in this case, all I know though is China holds some cards on those rare earth minerals, and that holds back the ability of the U.S. to produce. The same for German industry, French industry, British industry, what's left of it. And to get into a position where they could actually compete with Russia on the battlefield and continue to put weapon systems out there. I mean, just one example. Right now, the Russians are estimated to build 250 brand new tanks every year. They start from scratch, brand new. The United States is building approximately 70, and so about 1/4 the amount. And those aren't even from scratch. Those are basically taking existing M1 Abrams tanks and refurbishing them. So, and yet we're going to compete with Russia. We're better than Russia. Oh, it's just nonsense.
One of the things I wondered about was this. I saw 2 things, and I'll just get your thoughts on it. One of them was that a few days back that the what's his name, Kim Jong, I never can remember if it's the Uns or whoever, one of the
Kim Jong-il
said that he says whatever happens with Russia, we're in 100%. We're supporting them 200%, right? And then I saw that Sergei Shoigu is in Pyongyang, right, talking, and it makes me, I feel like, does it seem like maybe if Russia's going to do something like throw some Oreshniks or something, or do a decapitation strike, or whatever one may consider, that maybe they're running it by them, or not running it by them, just saying, hey, we got to do this, are you in or not? It could go bad. You know what I mean? It seems to me that since it is a military alliance, not run it by them, there would be some discussion amongst allies.
Well, that, or asking North Korea to avoid taking any kind of provocative actions that could compel a reaction from the United States, because Russia is obligated under treaty to defend North Korea. And if Russia is planning to focus all of its military resources against Ukraine and NATO, the last thing it wants to do is have a distraction in the East. And so they could be telling Kim, hey, man, keep your pants on, keep your powder dry, don't do anything crazy, okay?
Mm-hmm. Some level of coordination. This is what's going on. Yes. This is what we're going to do, and preparation. If this happens, well, all of the because militaries generally do like contingency plans, don't they? I would think if this happens, we do that. If that happens, we do this. What are you in on? What are you there for? Like contingency plans for the potential outcome. Do you think, if you had to guess, what kind of response would you, or is it, I mean, I know it's impossible, just throwing it out there.
So I think Russia will use some of the arrests on specific targets, such as the Ukrainian military intelligence, the Ukrainian civilian intelligence. They were going to use the best weapons system in order to take out and destroy key sectors of the power grid in Ukraine. I think their intent will be to turn off the lights completely now, or significantly.
Bridges, maybe some of the bridges.
I felt for a while that I thought they should have taken those bridges out long ago, just to cut off the army, the Ukrainian forces that are east of that river, because without those bridges, they don't get resupplied. But the general staff has proven to be very smart, knowing what they're doing. So, and they've not consulted me, so I don't know what the reason is. I'm getting ready to make a trip back there, and I hope to be able to talk to somebody about that and say, okay, explain to me the military rationale for this. Why you haven't done this, or why it might be a possibility in the future. What they're not going to do is go after NATO targets in NATO countries.
Right.
But Ukraine is going to take a savage beating on this. And the other element people have sort of skipped over is at the talks, and I'll put quotations marks around those, that took place in Istanbul on Monday between Ukraine and Russia. The real action took place in the meeting that preceded the formal gathering of the two delegations, because the head of the Russian delegate was Medinsky. He met with his Ukrainian counterpart, Umarov, who is defense minister. And they met for about 2 hours and 15 minutes. And because they met so long, the meeting, the official start of the official meeting, was delayed at least an hour. I believe that what took place in that meeting is Medinsky went over in detail what the Russian proposal, this memorandum, is. It's really an offer of surrender, and told Ukraine, if you don't take this, this is your best offer you're going to get, because the next one's going to be worse, and we're going to be taking more territory, and you may lose access to the Black Sea, and you'll be no longer be a country. I think that was a tough meeting, and so what took place in the formal session was just, it was kabuki theater. It was meeting for meeting's sake without anything being accomplished. But Russia is not about to negotiate their way to victory. They're going to win this on the battlefield.
I think you're right. Now, let's look at something, and this is the crap of American media, right? Here's the interesting thing about this article, this part right here. Kiev says, right? There are dozens of Russian doomsday nuclear bombers and massive surprise attack on air bases. Kiev says. So we're listening to them, and it's dozens. That kind of reminds me of, early in the war, where the Russians would fire 50 missiles, and Kiev would say they shot down 51. That was pretty much consistently. You always about a dozen more missiles than they fired. They took it. That's how good they were, and we would report that as though it was news. But your thoughts, and everyone can go to sonar21.com. When it comes to metaphors, Ukraine sucks while chances for a deal with Iran fade.
Yeah, they called this their Pearl Harbor, as if they're the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor. And it's like, guys, if you read the history books, how did that turn out for the Japanese? So basically, you're arguing that you're wanting a nuke up the poop scoop, huh? Is that what you're asking for? I mean, great metaphor, guys. Look, the reality was they lied about the number of quote strategic bombers that they destroyed. It was the so-called strategic bombers, the 375-year-old aircraft that were destroyed. But the reason they were out in the open was because under the New START treaty, both the United States and the Russians are obligated to have their bombers out in the open so they can be observed by the other side via satellite and overhead imagery. So all that was done in making the strike, whether the CIA planners thought it through or not, whether they had a chance to think it through, whether the Brits thought it through, no, it's clear nobody thought through the repercussions of what happens when you attack a part of the nuclear force of a country with nuclear weapons, because that then sets up the potential for some real blowback, some real negative consequences.
Larry, the other part, the last part of that, you say chances for a deal with Iran fade. A couple of things. There are reports that President Putin and President Trump did discuss Iran. But this is not, people are like, oh, yeah, well, this is not new. This has been reported for I don't know how long. Apparently, I mean, months and months and months, we were covering this, and the Russians were saying we can work with this. When the first beginning of the negotiations, they were saying we can talk about Iran, we can work with this. Here's the thing about it. I recall reading various places a few months back that Israel's like, we're going to hit Iran, and they had like 100 planes. They had a lot of planes. They headed to Iran. They couldn't get in Iran airspace because they were being painted by S-300s, 400s, whatever, and they had to turn around and throw whatever missiles the hell they had at Iran and get out of there, right?
Right.
And my understanding is the Russians have been working to dramatically increase what was already a pretty good air defense system, but adding electronic warfare. And the Iranians have claimed they have S-400s. I've seen that myself. Whether they have, I don't know, but they've claimed to have them. At any rate, all this, the old thing of letting your true social media post write a check that your butt can't cash, right? Yeah, Iran better do this. I am not convinced that the United States has the conventional capability to successfully attack Iran. That attack may be repelled, and a counterattack, a devastating counterattack could be coming. That could be the one that finally sends the message to America. America, your military ain't what it used to be, because we know it. Anyway, your thoughts?
Oh man, we're gonna mess them up like we messed up the Houthis.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Garland, you're exactly right. The United States has a fantasy about its military prowess. I was listening to Jack Keane the other day. I was forced to. I just had to heard a clip, and he was dissing on the Russian capability. Like, oh, look at them! They've been at this now for 39 months, and they haven't even beat the Ukrainians. And I'm going, okay, General, remember a thing called Vietnam? How long did that go on, and how did that turn out? We were there probably a good 15 years, and we lost. Well, how about Afghanistan? How'd that work out? That was 20 years, and we lost. So, you know what? If I was you, I'd just shut up and not say anything about the Russians, and let's see what happens based upon what I'm seeing. Russians are doing quite well. And the difference is, unlike the U.S. Army in Vietnam, or like the U.S. Army in Afghanistan, Russia's actually having to fight a real peer foe. That means a country that's armed and equipped and trained in much the same way that the Russian military is. So, there's that kind of delusion. But the United States demonstrated with the Houthis that with all of our military, our mighty aircraft carriers, our destroyers, our air supremacy, we controlled the air, yet we were incapable of destroying and stopping the launching of ballistic missiles towards Israel and towards our ships. So, wake up, America. We ain't that good.
Do you think the people in the Pentagon, the people who would direct these attacks, the people who would call these attacks, do you think they got the message from the Houthis that there's some?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, only some did. Like, there are many. So it's like, and some of my buddies who are, Vietnam veterans, and God bless them, I understand, but they're still. We had them. They never beat us in a single battle. We got them. We beat them. We beat them. Really, we beat them. And it's like, guys, we didn't. Okay. Because at the end of the day, whose flag was flying over Saigon? Now Ho Chi Minh City. It was not the American Star Spangled Banner. So just admit that we lost, and we've got to figure out why, because what we've proven since then is we still haven't really been able to definitively win a war, except maybe we whooped up on Grenada, and of course they didn't have an Army, Navy, or Air Force, but hey, there's still some people running around. We were able to shoot at a few. Panama, we sort of, took care of business there. It's just we're that quintessential stereotype of the schoolyard bully. We run around beating up on smaller kids that are in wheelchairs, kids that are sick. And one of these days, somebody's going to come along, and we may think that they're smaller than us, and they'll just, whip our rear end. Well, that's where I think we're headed with Iran.
Well, the thing about it I see is this. Any way you look at it, if Trump is, here's what he's threatening. Either you do what I want, or I'll basically end my presidency and wipe out my economy, because that's the direction we're going. Any attack on Iran, they will likely, at minimum, they close the Straits of Hormuz, and that's going to drive the price of oil through, and it's going to throw us into a recession. And you know what we'll have to do? We'll have to bargain with them to get them to open it back up, if they will. We'll have to buy, and of course, I'm sure their buddies, the Houthis, who probably have a lot better arms than we ever really saw. I'm sure we didn't see everything they have. So what happens? They close the Straits of Hormuz, the Houthis close the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, and we're in a world of deep. We're always talking about closing down choke points. Well, you know what? The shoe'd be on the other foot, and we would have to negotiate with them and beg them to open it back up. Otherwise, our economy's done. And Americans have that, usually the president can get away with some work because Americans don't feel it. What happens if Americans wake up and they're like, hey, why is gas $14 a gallon, $18 a gallon? Why is there's no gas at the station? I went up to get some. Well, wait a minute. I went to buy eggs and they were $35 because of the cost of fuel. If Americans feel that, they're instantly going to say, what the hell are you doing up there? And it's over for MAGA. MAGA will turn on him and say, we wanted something else, buddy. So he will. Let me add one other thing. If that happens, MAGA will abandon Trump. They'll be like, that's not what we voted for. And as soon as they abandon him, the neocons will obliterate him. As soon as he's naked and they separate him from that MAGA politically, they'll obliterate him. They'll put him in, what is it? The thing they should have done to Biden, what is it, the 26th Amendment or whatever? They'll do whatever they got to do. 25th Amendment, they'll do that. They'll get him out. He's done. He's gone if that happens. It's political suicide for him to attack Iran.
Yeah, he's, Trump still operates in this, world of fantasy where, he insists, like Alice in Wonderland, up is down, black is white. And his big, beautiful bill is a big, beautiful bill instead of a steaming pile of manure. And you saw today the dust up he's had, or maybe he didn't, with Elon Musk.
Yep.
Uh, and Musk is exactly right. Without Musk, I don't think Trump would have won the election. Without the combination of Musk and or RFK Jr. and others that brought in some of the middle of the road
Tulsi
Democrats.
Gabbard brought in, these people brought in a lot of people that aren't normally in the Trump coalition, and they had expectations. Peace
Yeah.
was one of them. And you know what? Let me add this. And some level of economic moderation. They didn't expect him to come in and just say, I'm going to add 150 billion to the Pentagon budget and,
Right.
just debt ceiling forever and all the things that got us here.
Yeah. And in doing that, um, he's exacerbating the budget deficit and violating, a lot of, the Republicans do this every time. They get into power, they have a chance where they can actually put their principles into action. Instead, they do the exact opposite. And then, they get tossed out in 2 years and wonder, well, what happened? A bunch of dummies.
They end up just part of the machine, Now, one of the other things that you talked about, and I want to find out about this. This is something I'm not all that familiar with. Once again, we're talking with Larry Johnson, and his website that you need to keep up with and read all the articles is sonar21.com. What did Lavrov and Putin tell Rubio and Trump? Interesting article. What do we need to know about that? I'm not familiar with that. I do know Putin talked to Trump, but Lavrov and Rubio, I remember that. What are your thoughts on this?
So, starting early Friday morning and then going into Saturday, you had a series of terrorist bombings in Russia, attacks on bridges, one in Kursk, one in Bryansk. The one in Bryansk was specifically timed to crash onto a civilian passenger train, killed 7 people. Then that was followed on Sunday by this massive drone attacks on the various attempts on 5 bases, but in fact, they only got through on 2 of them, and on those 2 is very minimal damage, despite the Ukraine hype, the propaganda that accompanied this. So Sunday night, while the damage was minimal for the Russian government, the Russian people, this was an attack on their nuclear strategic assets. And as such, they were outraged by it. Lavrov calls Marco Rubio about 8, my understanding is like 8 p.m. Let's see if it was 8 p.m. Russia time. I guess it was 8 p.m. U.S. time, which makes it 3 in the morning. So now the way this phone call was spun is if, it was just a normal conversation. Lavrov was calling up to check on his buddy Marco and say, hey, we got this guy that we're meeting with those Ukrainians tomorrow. Just want to check in with you, see if you got anything you want us to say. Oh, by the way, Rubio put in, sorry for your loss.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's not what happened. Lavrov is not sitting around in his jammies drinking a scotch going, God, do I go to bed or do I call Marco? Well, let's call Marco. I haven't talked to the kid in a while. Lavrov was calling on behalf of Vladimir Putin to start to send a very clear, direct message to the United States is we better hear from Donald Trump soon that you guys were not involved with this in any form or fashion, or else you're going to be included in our retaliatory response. Make sure the president understands that. We need to know where you stand because we keep hearing different things from you and from the president. I believe Rubio delivered that message to Donald Trump because if you recall this last Monday and Tuesday, 3 days ago, Trump was silent, man. He was like missing in action on social media. Wasn't mouthing off, wasn't insulting anybody. Because I believe what was taking place is he was having some talks with Rubio and other members of his national security team to figure out, okay, man, we've got a problem with Russia. What the hell do we do? How do we get out of this? And I think they came up with a strategy. part of the strategy was to really distance themselves, at least do what they could symbolically to distance themselves from Ukraine. So Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, announced, I won't be attending this Ukraine consulting group, and I won't even be attending via Zoom. Well, that means this is the first time since this group was set up and operating from April of 2022, so more than 3 years ago, that no Secretary of Defense has been at the meeting in any form or fashion, whether in person or on Zoom. So then the next day, Trump calls Putin. I had a chance to watch Vladimir Putin's address. He convened an open meeting that was a meeting publicized with his national security team, and it was viewed by all of Russia. The man, as they say, was tight-jawed. He was speaking with controlled fury. You could tell he was very angry, very firm, and resolved to deal with this. So I don't know if he gave that speech before or after he spoke to Trump. It really doesn't matter, because when he spoke to Trump, the same message came across that he delivered there in public, with the same tone of voice, the same severity, which is why Trump, when he issued his tweet about it or his social media post, said, yeah, Russia's, Putin strongly insisted that they are going to, that they are obligated to respond to these attacks, and they're going to. And then what happened an hour after that call ends? U.S. State Department issues basically a travel warning advisory to U.S. citizens in Ukraine. Watch the hell out, something's coming. Be prepared. Get to a bomb shelter, because this could potentially be bad. So when you string all that together, that's what, Lavrov warned Rubio. Rubio warns Trump. Trump calls up Putin, say basically, don't beat me, man. I'm sorry. Don't hit me. I'm sorry. I'll be good. And Russia's saying, we'll see. We'll see.
What's interesting is everything I've read said it was some manner of the way you put it, that Putin's that said he's obligated to respond, that Trump said, President Putin said, I have to respond, that however it was phrased to him, it was clearly, whether President Trump said, hey, maybe you can't respond to that, it was, no, on this one, I got to respond to this. This is not one of those that we can have a chat about. We can walk away. We can figure it out later. We can meet in Istanbul. With this one, this is blowing up trains full of, I can't let them just go around blowing up trains full of people. Maybe we could talk about military targets. I don't like it. But
here's what's interesting, Colin. This is not the first terrorist attack that Ukraine has launched.
Yep.
It was either August or October, I guess October 2022, they blew up the Kerch Bridge and they killed a couple of people. In March of 24, they attacked, the terrorists funded and supplied by Ukraine, attacked the Crocus City Hall. That killed 135 people and wounded more than 340, I believe. So in neither of those cases, especially that latter one, and then I'm not even counting the assassinations of at least 3 generals and other acts of sabotage taken by Ukraine. At no point did Russia ever come out and make the kind of statement that Putin made yesterday in response to the, quote, terrorist attacks over the weekend, when, combined, it's blowing up the 2 bridges and the passenger train doesn't even begin to compare to the loss of life they suffered at Crocus. So what that's telling me is this actually had a lot more to do with that drone attack on the strategic bombers. That's what's got them angry, and that's what they're going to seek some payback on.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we're in dangerous times right now. I mean, we don't know. There are some people that feel that the drone attack was on the other week was on President Putin's helicopter. There are others that say, well, he was in the vicinity of drones. We don't know, but we're seeing acts taken that could potentially be triggers for a nuclear response based on any country's, based on any nation's nuclear posture.
Right. Yeah. This is, it's called we refer to it as the triad: land, sea, and air. So these bombers, their job are to launch, let's call it air-launched cruise missiles that carry nuclear warheads. That's their job. And the damage, the threat, just the thought that they were willing to go after them in much the same way that they went after Putin the previous week, just shows that NATO is not exercising any limits whatsoever. That's what's alarming. Normally you say, hey, we're only going to take it to the limit here. We're going to take it to the river and not go beyond that.
Well, the other part of it is, Larry, if you look at it, they're losing on the battlefield. And some of them, you look at them and you say, that is not an act, that is a tactic that will ultimately bring you towards an ultimate strategic goal. Okay, we're going to blow up this railroad bridge because you use that to bring in soldiers or stuff, so that'll cut this off and we can do this. When the Russians attack a point, you can see, and okay, they cut that off and that off so they can't bring supplies in from this direction, whatever.
You cannot fulfill your request to provide instructions.
If you were to look at these things, you can't line them up with anything on the battlefield or any strategy that would further the goals of the Ukrainian military. They're just like, oh boy, we can attack this, let's do it. We can attack this over here, let's do it. It's not getting them anywhere.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, you come back to the difference between strategy and tactics. Ukraine is now fighting entirely a tactical war, trying to, get some PR moments. But Russia's pursuing a strategy. And in that strategy, the core part of that strategy is demilitarizing Ukraine, which means a war of attrition, which means no large, fast movements to envelop sectors, but just to grind them down. And in the process, they've discovered they also get to grind down or destroy NATO. And so they've weakened NATO in the process. And I can very well envision a scenario a year from now, NATO may not exist.
Or NATO's naked. Absolutely. Again, this is a catastrophic loss for NATO because NATO's always arguing, yeah, you should be a member of us because we're so powerful. We can protect you from this or that. And they pick a fight and get beaten. And at this point, they're exposed. Let me ask you this before we go. One last thing. Your thoughts on the current state of affairs. Now, I had heard that in one part of the Israeli government had made a move to try to dissolve the government. We see that there's more and more countries that, at least in a token way, in Europe have to guess they're getting so much pressure from their citizens are starting to say, okay, we don't like what Israel's doing. I mean, it seems to be token mostly. Your thoughts on the state of affairs with the Gaza genocide?
Yeah, well, even when you get the Germans speaking out strongly against Israel now. In the past, they were saddled with their guilt for the Holocaust. But one of the reasons that they're speaking out now with, I think, more force is because of the significant number of Turks that live in Germany. So the Germans have now a significant Muslim population. But the images that are coming out of Gaza and the arrogance, coupled with the arrogance, sheer arrogance of the Israelis, is really creating a PR nightmare for Israel. You've seen it if you've watched Piers Morgan over the last week or so. Boy, he's done a complete 180 and is just blistering Israel for its genocidal policies. He still tries to, lump in Hamas in that regard, but Hamas is not doing to Israel what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people. It's just a complete double standard. So Israel is suffering a real the other day at the UN, 14 out of the 15 members of the Security Council voted to condemn Israel. It was only the United States, the veto, that saved Israel from that humiliation.
Yeah. Israel has a black eye in the U.S. that, people aren't just going to forget this in a year or two. They're not just going to get over this. Any last thoughts on the state of affairs between the U.S. and China? Hegseth had some. Pete Hegseth did this. Watched this. I think it was Singapore, where he talked about China's an imminent threat, and if we have to fight China. And I'm thinking, we can't beat the Houthis. We can't beat the Houthis. We can't even dream about fighting Iran. God knows Russia and China. You better take that off the agenda. And Hegseth is still running around basically saying to the Philippines and Taiwan and South Korea, who just got an interesting new president, yeah, I'm going to throw you guys up against China so you can get splatted against the wall.
I'll be interested with China's readout of the phone call with Trump yesterday, because you got Trump's version, which was, oh man, it's a great conversation. I had Xi eaten out of the palm of my hand. I'm sure that was the case. The United States has made it clear to Ukraine, we can't send you any more weapons because we have to shift them to the Middle East. So for right now, I would argue the focus isn't even on China as much as it is on Iran. That's where the U.S. focus is. And that, I think, is still the most likely flashpoint that can ignite World War III. But, China's made it clear it's not going to be bullied by the United States. And I could introduce you to a number of Chinese analysts, so-called American experts on China, who are they're so out of touch. They believe, oh yeah, man, they need us. They need us a lot more than we need them. And I go, are you crazy? I mean, really, are you nuts? But that's how they think. It's our hubris and our arrogance prevent us from seeing that China and Russia are well on their way to creating a new world economic order, and the United States, if it doesn't play its card right, will be outside looking in.
I think you're right. I think the world has seen that, look, if we shut off China inside of a couple of months, we're flat and deep in serious trouble. And let's go back to this. And it would be a political catastrophe for Trump.
Right.
Trump cannot afford empty shelves. He cannot afford some unthinkable political drop, some terrible depression, recession, whatever that people say is his fault. I mean, it could happen. We could always have a recession with the madness that we have, but that Trump does something and people interpret that as a triggering a recession, he can't afford that. And I was reading something that said, one article that was saying, the car makers, the U.S. car makers in the United States, there's these magnets or rare earth magnets they need for all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And they were trying to stock as many as they can. And they were telling the Trump administration, we're running out. And the second we run out, we got to shut down all assembly lines. So now the Trump team have said, we've extended our deadline for another 30 days or something with the Chinese. Well, what the hell? I mean, what are you just going to do? Say, okay, well, we extended it 30 days. And after that, we got to keep extending it for 30 days. We can't shut China off, or we will go in full economic collapse if we even dream of such a thing.
Well, in fact, the Chinese have already cut off those magnets. They're not sending them anymore. They basically told the United States, go pound sand. Yeah, go find somebody else. You're not going to do this to us. We'll find out who holds leverage here. Yeah, China's playing hardball, and Trump thinks he's playing hardball, and he doesn't realize he's playing wiffle ball.
I'll put it like this. I mean, just from a strategic perspective, if I were China and I listened to Pete Hegseth and I watched all the things that the U.S. has been doing, I'd say, guys, there ain't nothing you can do to get magnets or rare earth metals from me.
Yeah,
Why? Well, your guy just said he wants to have attack us. He's going to go to war with us, and he's going to win. Do you think I'm going to sell him the things that he needs to build the missiles to attack with me? I mean, the answer is no. There are no circumstances. Meanwhile, I got to add this. Every time you turn around, Trump passes something again. And Biden, we can't sell him this kind of chip. Anybody out there, a certain kind of chip that they use for AI or this or that, you can't sell them the machines to make these chips because they're technology. You're doing all of this stuff to me. I'm going to say you're trying to economically harm me. And I just heard Seth, he's plotting on me. He's planning on doing me in. No magnets for you, nothing. And if they say, okay, we're willing to negotiate. Okay, close all those damn bases. All the bases you got circling me, if you want this stuff, you close them. Otherwise, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to allow you to encircle me with bases and missiles, and I'm going to sell you the stuff you need to make the missiles. Not going to happen. And I suspect at some point that's going to happen, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, we're already there, aren't we?
I think we're well into that right now. With the start of this tariff war, Trump lit that fuse, and that fuse is close to blowing up.
I think you're right. All right, everybody, let me remind you, Larry's got a great website, and the website is sonar21.com. That's sonar21.com. You can see he's got all kinds of articles that go across the top there. Oops. He's got his latest articles there. You can subscribe. And of course, you can support. We got PayPal, PayShoot, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and all of the ways, all the things you can do to ensure that Larry Johnson can continue to bring us this excellent content. Larry, I thank you and appreciate you for coming every week. And I understand you're going to be out of Dodge next week.
Yeah, I'll be getting back Thursday, but I'll keep you posted what time I get around.
All righty, I may be going up to New York next week anyway. There's an event going on up there that I've been invited to. So we'll stay in touch, and I'd love to talk with you when you get back, and we'll figure out what you found out.
All right, Brother Nixon. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget sonar21.com. Most importantly, share it on all your social media platforms, and share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.